The sun bled into the horizon, turning the sky the color of bruises. Dust rose in slow spirals from the wagon wheels, dry and sighing like old bones. Clara sat on a bale of hay, her wrists raw from rope, her lips chapped by wind and silence. She didn't cry, she hadn't in months, but something in her stomach twisted every time she looked at the man beside her. Her stepfather, Marlon Gray, spat tobacco juice onto the cracked earth and smiled like he'd just struck gold. "You'll mind your tongue and your hands, girl," he muttered without looking at her. "A good rancher'll know how to keep you in line." Clara's eyes drifted to the dying sun. She imagined running toward it barefoot, dirt under her heels, wind yanking her hair loose. But the horizon was a trickster, always far and always out of reach. The wagon stopped at a rise where an old homestead sagged under the weight of age. A wooden sign read DeWitt Ranch, half hanging from one rusted nail. The place looked like it had been punched in the jaw by time itself, weather-beaten, joyless, dead in all but name. An older man stepped out from the shadows of the barn. He wore a long duster, frayed at the cuffs, and his beard had more gray than white. His gait was steady, but there was a hollow shuffle in his step, like his boots were used to kicking things that didn't kick back. "That her?" he asked, voice like dry leaves. Marlon yanked Clara off the wagon. 18. Strong back. Can cook, clean, sew. And she knows horses. His grip on her arm was bruising. The rancher circled her like she was livestock. "Does she talk?" "Too much, sometimes." "Not to me, she won't." Clara met his eyes then, ice behind glass. "I don't belong to you," she said, even though her voice was shaking. The old man smiled, a wolfish thing. "You do now." The handshake between Marlon and DeWitt was short, greasy. Money exchanged hands. Clara didn't watch. She looked at the barn, at the horses swaying in their stalls, at the sun disappearing behind the hills. Her father had always said, "The world changes when you lose your shadow." She'd lost hers the day her mother died, and her stepfather started looking at her like a burden he couldn't wait to trade. That night, the bunkhouse smelled like sweat and desperation. DeWitt hadn't touched her, not yet. He'd said she'd earn her keep in the morning, starting with mucking stalls and milking sour cows. But Clara barely slept. She stared at the ceiling beams, listening to the coyotes howl like ghosts, wondering if she'd ever be more than something handed off like a rusted saddle. Her room had no lock, no mirror, just a cot and a nail for hanging a dress. She dreamed of open plains and her father's voice teaching her how to gentle a wild horse. "You don't break a spirit to tame it," he used to say. "You show it how to run with you." She woke to the sound of boots. Eli, an old ranch hand with knuckles like pine knots and eyes that had seen too much, grunted at her. "Breakfast's over. DeWitt wants ya in the stables." He didn't wait. She followed him through the morning fog, dew soaking her boots, her body aching from sleep that wasn't rest. The stables were alive with snorts and restless hooves. She felt something settle in her chest, something familiar and painful. She touched the mane of a dapple-gray mare who didn't flinch from her hand. "She ain't mean," Eli said, watching her. "Just doesn't trust easy." "Neither do I," Clara replied. He gave a dry chuckle. "You'll do fine here. Just don't go dreaming. Dreams die quicker'n flies in this place." Clara learned quickly. She worked hard, didn't talk unless spoken to, and kept her eyes on the ground. DeWitt didn't like questions. He liked obedience, silence, and his whiskey. Days blurred into a monotony of sweat and swallowing fear. The ranch hands were mostly cruel or indifferent, except Eli, who left small kindnesses. A fresh biscuit tucked near her cot, a wool blanket folded when the nights dropped cold. Then, on the 7th day, a stranger rode in. He didn't come with fanfare. No whipcrack entrance, no wild stallion. Just a tall man on a lean buckskin horse, his hat low over his face, a rifle slung across his back. DeWitt met him at the gate. "You the new hand?" The man nodded. "Cal Callahan." His voice was low, steady, like wind over gravel. He had a scar along his jaw that didn't look earned in a fair fight. "You any good?" "I'm still standing." That was enough for DeWitt. Cal didn't talk much. He ate alone, worked harder than most, and fixed a broken fence line that had been leaning for 2 winters without complaint. Clara noticed his hands were rough, but precise. He moved like someone who'd seen war or something like it, and had learned how to survive by not wasting breath. She tried not to stare, but it was hard not to watch someone who looked like he belonged to the land more than the house. One afternoon, as she led a skittish colt from the pen, the rope slipped from her hand and the animal bolted, wild-eyed. She stumbled, landing hard in the dirt. Cal was there before she could blink. He stepped in front of the colt, calm as a still pond, and raised one hand. The animal slowed, breathing heavy, then lowered its head. Clara stared, dust on her lips, her heart hammering. He offered her a hand. She hesitated, then took it. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded. "You're good with them," she said, brushing dirt from her skirt. "They listen better than people." She gave a small, cracked smile. "Ain't that the truth?" It wasn't much, but it was the first real conversation she'd had since she got there. And it didn't feel like talking to someone who wanted something from her. Just someone who saw her. Days passed. Cal became part of the rhythm. He didn't push. But he noticed things, like how Clara's hands bled when DeWitt made her scrub the floors raw, or how she flinched when loud boots passed by her door at night. One evening, she sat on the fence after chores, the sky turning orange and violet. He stood a few feet away, silent. "Why were you here?" she asked. "Looking for quiet," he said. "You won't find it here." He looked at her then, really looked. "Sometimes you don't come looking for quiet. You come to quiet something else." They didn't speak again that night. But something had changed. Inside her, a small ember glowed. That night, DeWitt stumbled and drunk. He grabbed her wrist in the kitchen, his breath foul, his grip cruel. "I seen you smiling at that drifter," he slurred. "Think I don't notice? You'll learn who owns what around here." She didn't speak, didn't scream. But her eyes were lit with something old and unkillable. He shoved her away. "Ain't no fight left in you anyway." But he was wrong. There was nothing but fight. And as she lay in her cot, breathing through the rage, she knew. The quiet cowboy hadn't just come for a job. He'd come for something else. Something not even he understood yet. Not yet. But soon. The wind rolled down from the hills like a warning. By mid-morning, a dry heat had settled across DeWitt Ranch, the kind that clung to skin and turned the air to sand. Cal Callahan worked in silence, his shadow long and lean against the barn wall as he replaced a rotted fence post. Each hammer strike echoed across the valley like a drumbeat. He didn't talk to the other hands unless he had to. Most didn't bother trying to talk to him. Men like Cal had the kind of quiet that made others nervous. Clara watched him from a distance as she swept the porch steps. He was unlike anyone she'd ever known. No swagger, no need to fill the air with talk. Just steady hands and a stillness that felt like safety. She found herself looking for him, not out of girlish fancy, but as one might check for the sun in a sky full of storm clouds. When DeWitt wasn't around, Clara felt a bit more herself. She could breathe easier, her shoulders a little less rigid, her mind a little less fogged by fear. But the moment she heard his boots, sharp, angry steps that always hit the boards too hard, her body remembered to shrink. It was Eli who noticed first. One evening, he nudged Cal with the tip of a boot while they ate their supper on the bunkhouse steps. "You got a reason for watching that girl like a man watching a fuse burn?" he asked without looking up from his tin plate. Cal didn't answer. Eli grunted. "Thought not. But DeWitt's the jealous type and the drunk kind. You get between him and something he thinks he owns, there's going to be hell to pay." Cal didn't flinch. "She don't look like she belongs here." "None of us do," Eli said. "Difference is, she still believes there's somewhere better." Cal's eyes followed Clara as she walked toward the stables, her braid trailing behind her like a banner. She moved with caution, but not defeat. It was resilience in slow motion. The next afternoon, Clara and Cal crossed paths again in the corral. A young colt had torn a hoof on a nail, and Clara was kneeling beside it, murmuring something soft and low as she tried to soothe the animal. Cal leaned against the rail, arms crossed, watching her work. "You talk to horses like they're people," he said. She didn't look up. "They listen better than people." He smiled faintly. That's what I said. I remember, she said, finally glancing up. Her eyes were guarded, but not cold. Why'd you really come here? Cal hesitated. Figured it was time to go somewhere no one knew my name. That's not an answer, she said, standing. That's a curtain. He walked over slowly, taking a piece of cloth from his pocket and kneeling beside the colt to help wrap the hoof. I had a brother, he said quietly. Younger, smart, loud, got into trouble. Someone tried to steal our land back east. Said it wasn't ours, even though we'd bled for it. My brother wouldn't bend. I buried him under a cottonwood tree. Clara didn't speak. The wind picked up, tossing her hair into her eyes. She didn't move to brush it away. I tried to go after the men who did it, Cal continued, tightening the wrap on the colt. But the law was on their side. So I stopped looking for justice. Started looking for quiet. And did you find it? Some days, he said, rising to his feet. But quiet don't last long in places like this. Clara looked away, toward the house. She knew too well how quickly peace could vanish. How silence could turn to shouting in the time it took to drop a plate or close a door too hard. DeWitt's presence became heavier in the days that followed. He didn't like Cal. It wasn't what he said, it was the way his eyes narrowed when he saw them talking. The way he lingered too long when Clara passed by, as if daring Cal to say something. The foreman, Jeb, a man with a rattlesnake grin and a habit of cracking his knuckles when he spoke, started tailing Clara on her errands. You best keep your distance, Eli warned Cal one night, sharpening a blade by lantern light. That girl's walking a knife's edge, and if you lean too close, she'll cut herself trying to shield you. Cal didn't reply, but the next morning, he walked beside Clara on her way to the lower pasture. Their words were few, but the silence between them was no longer empty. It was a space of shared weight. Later that week, Cal found her in the barn loft, staring out at the mountains with a piece of dried apple in her hand. You ever think about running? He asked. Every day, she said. Why don't you? She looked down at the ranch, the open fields, the broken fences, the men who'd never help her. I wouldn't get far. Not alone. He stepped closer. What if you weren't alone? Clara turned to face him, her eyes dark and unreadable. Why would you help me? Because you don't belong here, he said. Because I've seen men like DeWitt before, and I don't like watching people rot from inside out. She didn't trust it. Not fully. But there was something in his voice, low and honest, that slid past her defenses. There's a cattle drive in 2 weeks, he added. They'll be stretched thin. I can take us out through the arroyo and down into Utah territory. I've got a map. Her heart beat, so loud she was sure he could hear it. You'd risk all that for me? He shrugged. Maybe not just for you. Maybe for myself, too. That night, Clara lay awake. The journal Cal had given her hidden beneath her pillow. It wasn't much, just a blank ledger from town, but it felt like a door. A place to put things she couldn't say aloud. She wrote one word on the first page. Soon. The days crept forward. DeWitt grew meaner, his drinking heavier. He slapped Jeb for losing a pocket knife and yelled at Clara for burning bread that never made it to the fire. The tension on the ranch was a rope drawn tight, ready to snap. Clara started packing small things, dried apples, a bit of jerky, a flint striker wrapped in cloth. Every movement was a risk. Every look could be a signal. But she never wavered. Not after Cal promised he'd ride beside her. The day before the cattle drive, DeWitt cornered her near the water trough. His breath reeked of whiskey and rot. You think I don't see it, he hissed. That look in your eyes. You think you're clever. You think someone's gonna save you. Clara didn't speak. You were bought. Same as the rest. Ain't no man alive gonna change that. He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. Then he froze. Behind them, a rifle clicked. Cal stood 5 feet away, his gaze cold. The barrel pointed at the dirt just beside DeWitt's boot. Let go, he said. DeWitt stared at him for a long moment, then released her. You just made a mistake, boy. No, Cal replied. I don't make the same mistake twice. Clara didn't breathe until DeWitt was gone. You just put a target on your back, she said. It was already there, he answered. As the sun fell behind the hills, they met again in the barn. Eli was there, his face grave. I'll buy you a head start, the old man said. Ain't much I can do after that. You owe me nothing. But you do right by her." Cal nodded. Clara took one last look at the only place she'd known since her world fell apart. Then she turned to Cal. "Let's ride." The sky was still ink black when Clara swung her leg over the saddle, heart thrumming like a war drum. The mare beneath her shifted, sensing the weight of her rider's nerves. Beside her, Cal adjusted the cinch on his buckskin gelding without a word. The silence between them was sharp, stretched tight with purpose. Eli stood near the gate, a lantern dangling low in his hand. He hadn't spoken since they'd slipped from a barn, and his face looked like old bark, creased, unreadable. "You sure about this?" Eli finally asked, voice rough with sleep and something deeper, something like fear. Clara looked toward the ranch house, where a single candle still burned in DeWitt's window. "There's nothing left for me here." Cal mounted without a word. He handed Clara the small leather satchel they'd packed, jerky, dried apples, a canteen, a compass. She took it, her fingers brushing his, and then they turned toward the open land beyond the last fence. Eli watched them go, lantern flickering. "Ride hard," he said into the dark. "And don't look back." They didn't. The wind whipped around them as they galloped through the low scrub, hooves pounding against dry earth. The night air was cold, biting, alive with hidden sounds, owls, coyotes, the distant howl of a wolf. Clara's braids snapped behind her like a flag. Her eyes stung with wind and memory. Every breath was freedom laced with fear. By sunrise, they'd crossed the back pasture and entered a narrow pass that Cal called the Widow's Gully, a cut of land known more for rattlers and rustlers than salvation. But it was off the usual trails, hidden from the main road. That made it safe. For now. They slowed to a trot and ducked beneath a ridge where the rock walls curved like the spine of a beast. Cal dismounted to check for tracks. Clara stayed on her horse, eyes scanning the horizon for any hint of dust. "Nothing yet," Cal said, brushing a gloved hand against the dirt. "But they'll come." "They'll know I'm gone by now," Clara said. "He won't let it go." Cal met her eyes. "Then we stay ahead." The hours blurred. They rode until the sun was high and their throats were dry as bone. In the heat of midday, they found shade beneath a twisted juniper. Clara leaned against the trunk, her face pale, legs trembling from the ride. "I didn't know it would feel like this," she said. "Running." Cal took a long drink from the canteen and passed it to her. "It's not just running, it's choosing." She drank slowly. "And if he catches us?" "Then I stop running." She looked at him, really looked, as if trying to see, beneath the silence, he wore like armor. "You always like playing the lone hero." "I'm not a hero," he said. "I just know what it feels like to lose your way. You showed me something I forgot, why it matters to keep going." The wind stirred the leaves above them, and for a moment, the gully was quiet, almost peaceful. Then the first shot cracked like lightning. The bullet kicked dust a foot from Cal's boot. He shoved Clara behind the tree and drew his revolver in one motion, scanning the ridgeline. 3 riders, he hissed. Maybe more. DeWitt's men, Jeb among them, rode hard from the west, guns drawn, mouths twisted with purpose. They'd followed the trail fast, too fast. "Stay low," Cal said, reloading as Clara grabbed a nearby branch for cover. He fired twice. One bullet grazed a rider's shoulder, sending him spinning off his horse. The others returned fire, the air thick with the whip of bullets and the acrid bite of gunpowder. Clara felt her lungs tighten. She'd never heard a gun this close, never seen death try to touch her. She looked at Cal, calm, efficient, almost graceful as he moved, as though he were built for this. Blood bloomed on his sleeve, but he didn't flinch. "Go," he shouted. "Up the ridge, cut behind that rock ledge. I'll cover." "No," Clara said, but her voice cracked. He grabbed her arm, eyes burning. "Now, Clara." She ran. The rocks scraped her hands and tore at her skirt, but she climbed with everything she had. Behind her, the gunfire echoed like thunder through the pass. When she reached the ledge, she turned just in time to see Cal stumble, a second bullet tearing through his side. He fell behind a boulder, out of view. Clara's scream was swallowed by the wind. She scrambled down the other side of the ridge, not stopping until her feet gave out beneath her. She crawled back toward where Cal had fallen, heart hammering, unsure what she'd find. He was there, half propped against a stone, his shirt soaked red. "You idiot," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "You're welcome," he rasped. Clara tore strips from her sleeve and pressed them against the wound, hands shaking. "You're not dying. You hear me." "I hear you." They waited in silence. DeWitt's men didn't pursue. Either they thought Cal was dead or they'd gone to flank them. Either way, it bought time. Clara helped him to his feet, arm over her shoulder, and together they limped deeper into the gully. The world narrowed to blood, sweat, and the sound of their breaths, each one a battle. By nightfall, they reached a narrow cave tucked into the base of a bluff. Cal collapsed inside, groaning as he settled onto the dirt. Clara started a fire with shaking hands, the flint nearly slipping from her grip. She boiled water, cleaned the wound as best she could, biting her lip until it bled just to keep from crying. "You should have left me," Cal murmured. She didn't answer. Later, when the flames had softened the chill, Clara sat beside him, knees drawn to her chest. Her voice was low. "He told me once I was just something to trade, that no one would ever see more than that." Cal's head turned slightly. "But you looked at me like I was real, like I mattered." "You do," he said, "even if I don't live to tell you that again." She blinked hard. "Don't talk like that. I just need to rest." "You rest. I'll keep watch." He closed his eyes. The firelight flickered on his face, turning the lines of pain into something almost peaceful. Outside, the desert night was loud with insects and distant howls. Clara didn't sleep. At dawn, she stepped outside the cave and looked east, toward Utah territory. She saw no riders, no dust trails, only the long road ahead. Behind her, Cal stirred. "We made it through the first night," she said, more to herself than him. He smiled faintly. "Then we're already halfway there." The journey was far from over, but something had changed. Clara no longer felt like she was fleeing. She was moving toward something, a life not yet lived, and she wasn't alone. The road to freedom wasn't carved in grand gestures. It was a collection of small, painful steps, bleeding feet, sleepless nights, and a sky that didn't care whether you lived or died. Clara learned that quickly. Cal's fever broke on the third day. She'd kept him alive with boiled sage and river water, cleaning his wound with trembling hands and whispered prayers. He slept more than he spoke, but when he opened his eyes, she saw the fight still in him. It gave her strength she didn't know she had. They traveled slow, keeping off known trails, cutting across bluffs and dry creek beds. Clara hunted rabbits with Cal's old revolver, her aim improving with every missed shot. By the end of the week, he was riding again, sore slower than before, but alive. It was enough. A town finally appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Low buildings huddled beneath a massive cottonwood, smoke curling from chimneys, the clatter of hooves and hammers drifting through the dusty air. Cal said its name was Willow Creek. He'd passed through years ago and remembered it as a place folks kept to themselves. They rode in at dusk, drawing stares from a blacksmith, a woman hauling water, a pack of barefoot children. Clara kept her head down. She didn't know what people saw when they looked at her now, but it wasn't the same girl who'd arrived on DeWitt's ranch with dirt on her dress and a rope around her spirit. An old widow named Mavis took them in. Her son had died in the war, her husband years before that. She had a cottage near the orchard and 2 extra cots. No questions asked. "You're running from something," Mavis said to Clara that first night, handing her a bowl of stew. "Don't matter what. What matters is where you're running to." Clara hadn't answered. Not out loud. She spent her mornings tending Mavis's herb garden, her afternoons patching clothes for townsfolk, and her evenings watching Cal teach local boys how to saddle a horse without getting kicked in the teeth. Some nights she joined him. "Your shoulder still hurt?" she asked once, handing him a pail of water. "Not as much as it used to. You talk more now." He gave a slow, crooked smile. "That's 'cause you're always asking questions." They sat on the porch steps as the sun sank low, the sky blushing pink and gold. Cal looked older in the soft light. Not worn, but weathered like something carved by wind and time. Clara looked down at her hands. They were rough now, strong. She didn't flinch at sudden noises anymore. "You ever wonder if it'll catch up with us?" she asked. DeWitt. She nodded. "I think about it, but I don't fear it." "Why not?" "Because I'm not the same man who rode into that ranch. And I'm not the same girl who was sold there." He looked at her, then really looked. "You never were." Weeks passed. The town grew used to them. Clara began helping Mavis at the infirmary, where she learned to stitch wounds and comfort grieving mothers. Her hands, once used for scrubbing floors and calming horses, now healed others. The pain she carried didn't vanish. It became something she offered, a way to connect. One evening, Mavis handed Clara a letter. It was sealed in brown paper, addressed in shaky script. "It's from Eli," she said. Clara tore open. The note was short. "DeWitt's gone. Shot dead by one of his own men. Word is, he lost the ranch in a card game before he died. Ain't nobody looking for you anymore. Thought you should know." Clara read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into her pocket. She didn't cry. That night, she stood outside beneath the stars, arms wrapped around herself. Cal found her there, silent as always. "He's gone," she said. "It's really over." Cal nodded. "Then maybe now it can begin." She turned to him. "What do we do now?" "Whatever we want." They stood close, the space between them smaller than it had ever been. She leaned forward, resting her head on his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, gentle but firm, like he'd been waiting to do it forever. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just rode alongside." Years later, they bought a small stretch of land near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough room for a few horses and a crooked fence. Clara opened a riding school for orphan girls, teaching them how to sit a saddle and hold their heads high. Cal built the stables with his own hands, whittled each beam until it fit just right. He didn't talk much, but when he did, the kids listened. He didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. Clara spoke at the church once a season, telling her story, not the way others might, not with self-pity or dramatics, but with truth. She told them how freedom wasn't something handed to you. It was something you chose again and again, even when it hurt, even when it cost everything. Sometimes she saw it in their eyes, the other Claras, sitting silent in the back pews, waiting for someone to tell them they weren't alone. When the sun dipped low over the prairie and the horses were fed, Clara would sit on the porch beside Cal. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, but always they listened. To the wind, to the crickets, to the quiet they'd earned. One evening, as the horizon burned with gold, Clara stood before the girls at the corral. Dust swirled around their boots. The youngest asked her why she never rode too far out, beyond the far ridge. Clara smiled. "I rode far enough once," she said. "Far enough to know what I was made of. That's all I needed." Later, she wrote in her journal, the same one Cal gave her long ago. She filled a page with steady handwriting and then paused, the lantern flickering beside her. She turned to the last blank space and wrote, "The West was wild, but not as wild as a girl's will to be free." She closed the journal, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running from anything. She was finally home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, freedom ain't given. It's taken.